I will never forget the day in January 1949 when my dad said to me, "Son, we're in trouble. Chiang Kai-shek has abandoned the city and we're at the mercy of the Red Army." And in they came. So I was 2 years under the reign of terror at the beginning of the Chinese Revolution. Thank God that you had these two great revolutions in the 20th century, 1917 and 1949, and the English-speaking people had stood firmly, the West as a whole, against autocracy. And I think that's important today because you can see the rise of looming autocracy, China, Russia, North Korea, and this time, though, the West in considerable confusion and uncertainty. But the French Revolution was like a gigantic volcanic explosion in European history, and the lava flow has flowed out ever since. The first was in the 19th century, revolutionary nationalism, the least important in some ways. The second is the well-known one, revolutionary socialism, or in one word, communism, which broke out in the 20th century, but of course designed by Marx and Engels in the 19th century. But many people don't realize that what we're facing now is the third great lava flow, not classical Marxism, but cultural Marxism or revolutionary liberationism. And this goes back to thinkers like Antonio Gramsci, George Lukács, and so on. And they gave rise to this idea of a cultural Marxism, which was picked up by the Frankfurt School in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and became very, very important in America, breaking into the New Left through the leadership of Herbert Marcuse at the University of San Diego. And the key year in the 60s was 1968, which intriguingly was the first year I visited America as a young man. 100 American cities were ablaze. Martin Luther King had been assassinated, Senator Robert Kennedy assassinated, and you had the so-called Chicago police riots at the Democratic Convention. But here's the point. The radicals, after all this 50 years of the growth of the Frankfurt School, they knew they would not win in the streets. So they called for a long march through the institutions, the word picked up by a Red Brigade leader in Germany. In other words, slowly, incrementally, win the colleges and universities, win the press and the media, win the world of culture industry, Hollywood and entertainment, and then sweep round and win the whole, like the Long March in China, Mao's 6,000 march around from the southeast to the north. And of course, as we look back 50 years later, they've done it. If people think every great civilization has an inspiration or a dynamic, something through which it rises. So a culture is simply a way of life lived in common. But a civilization is more than that. It's a culture that rises high enough, that spreads far enough, and of course lasts long enough. And of course, if you think most of the previous civilizations have gone, they're in ruins or museums or history books. Why? They reach a civilizational moment when they lose touch with the inspiration that made them what they were. And at that moment, there's only three broad options. You can have a renewal of the original inspiration, or you can have a genuine, solid replacement of the original inspiration, or, in the absence of both of those, decline. So the West today is in a moment of civilizational crisis. It lacks the inspiration, the dynamism that made it the civilization it's been.